Your soulmate checked your profile before midnight. They didn't expect to feel this, and what began as a simple moment of curiosity slowly turned into something far more emotional than your soulmate ever anticipated. The evening had been ordinary at first, the kind of night where daily responsibilities finally begin to quiet down and a person finds themselves with a little time to relax. Many people end their day by scrolling through their phone, looking through social media or checking in on updates from friends and familiar faces. Your soulmate was doing exactly that. There was nothing unusual about it at first. They were simply moving from one page to another, glancing at different profiles and updates the way people do when they want to unwind after a long day. Their mind was not expecting anything significant to happen during that quiet moment. But sometimes the smallest actions lead to emotional experiences that no one plans for. Somewhere in the middle of that quiet scrolling, your profile appeared on their screen. It may have been through a suggestion, a remembered search, or simply because they typed your name almost without thinking about it. The moment your profile appeared, something inside them paused. It was not a dramatic reaction at first, just a brief moment where their finger hovered over the screen before tapping to open it. Curiosity was the only thing guiding them in that moment. People often look at the profiles of someone they once knew simply to see how life has been treating them. That was likely the reason your soulmate clicked. At least, that is what they believed at the time. But as soon as your profile opened, something unexpected began happening inside them. The images, the words, the small details that represented your life today immediately triggered a series of memories they had not revisited in a long time. Memories have a unique way of returning when we encounter something that reminds us of the past. A single photograph or a familiar expression can bring back entire moments that once seemed distant or forgotten. Your soulmate may have expected to glance quickly at your profile and then move on, but instead they found themselves lingering longer than they intended. They started scrolling slowly, looking at pictures, reading captions, and noticing small things about you that felt both familiar and new at the same time. As they continued scrolling, the feeling of curiosity slowly transformed into something deeper. Each detail they noticed about your life reminded them of earlier moments when the two of you shared conversations or experiences together. Those memories began surfacing naturally, almost as if they had been waiting for a reason to return. At first, your soulmate might have smiled at some of those memories. There is often a warmth that comes from remembering times when life felt emotionally genuine and uncomplicated. But along with that warmth came another feeling they had not expected. An emotional weight they could not easily explain. The longer they looked at your profile, the more they realized that the connection they once shared with you had left a deeper impression on them than they had previously admitted to themselves. For a long time, they may have believed that the past had already been settled and that the feelings connected to it had faded naturally over time. Life often moves quickly, and when people become busy with responsibilities, they sometimes assume that emotional chapters from earlier in their life are finished. Your soulmate may have thought exactly that. But the moment they saw your profile again, those assumptions began to change. The memories returning to their mind were not distant or faded. Instead, they felt vivid and emotionally present. That realization alone surprised them. They may have paused scrolling for a moment, staring quietly at the screen while trying to understand why seeing you again, even through a digital profile, was stirring so many emotions inside them. It is in moments like this that people often discover something unexpected about their own heart. Your soulmate may have believed they had moved past the emotional significance of the connection they once shared with you. Yet as they continued looking through your profile, they realized that certain feelings had never truly disappeared. Those emotions had simply been buried beneath everyday routines and responsibilities. Seeing your life again reminded them of the person you were when they knew you closely. It reminded them of conversations where both of you spoke openly, moments of laughter, and perhaps even quiet moments where simply being present together felt meaningful. Emotional authenticity like that is rare, and when someone experiences it, the memory often stays with them longer than they expect. Your soulmate may have started noticing how different their emotional reaction felt compared to what they anticipated. They originally opened your profile thinking it would be nothing more than a quick glance. But now they found themselves sitting quietly, reflecting on memories that were much more meaningful than they had realized before. The clock was slowly approaching midnight, yet they were still there, scrolling slowly and absorbing the emotions that were surfacing inside them. It was not simply nostalgia. It was the realization that the connection they once had with you had shaped part of their emotional life in ways they had never fully acknowledged. That realization can be powerful because it forces someone to look at their past with honesty rather than assumption. Your soulmate may have felt both surprised and slightly overwhelmed by the depth of their reaction. They might have wondered why those feelings were returning now after so much time had passed. Sometimes the answer is simple: the heart remembers what truly mattered, even when the mind believes those memories have been left behind. As the minutes passed and midnight approached, your soulmate was no longer simply looking at a profile. They were confronting emotions and memories that revealed something important about their own heart, something they did not expect to feel again, yet something that had quietly remained inside them all along. As your soulmate continued sitting with their phone in hand, the quiet moments before midnight slowly began turning into a much deeper emotional experience than they ever imagined when they first opened your profile. At the beginning, curiosity had been the only reason for that small action. They probably told themselves that it was nothing more than a quick look, the kind people do when they randomly think about someone they once knew. But as the minutes passed and they continued scrolling through your page, they realized that what they were feeling was no longer simple curiosity. Something inside them had awakened, an emotional response that felt both familiar and surprising at the same time. The more they looked at your profile, the more their mind began returning to moments from the past that had once felt natural and meaningful. Sometimes a single picture can trigger an entire memory. A smile in a photograph can remind someone of laughter they once shared. A familiar expression can bring back the sound of someone's voice or the way a conversation once unfolded. Your soulmate likely experienced exactly that as they continued looking through the details of your page. They might have paused on certain photos longer than others, noticing small things that reminded them of who you were when they knew you closely. Perhaps it was the way you expressed yourself, the energy in your pictures, or even the sense that you still carried the same qualities that once drew them toward you. Those small observations slowly started building into a larger realization: the emotional connection they once felt with you had never fully disappeared. For a long time, your soulmate may have assumed that the chapter of life connected to you had already closed. Life has a way of pushing people forward into new routines and responsibilities. As time passes, people sometimes convince themselves that earlier feelings have naturally faded. Your soulmate might have believed that as well. They may have told themselves that whatever emotions once existed between you had simply become part of the past. But the moment they found themselves sitting there, looking through your profile long after they intended to, they began noticing something they had not expected. The emotions connected to those memories still felt alive. They were not faint or distant the way your soulmate thought they would be. Instead, they carried a quiet intensity that surprised them. That realization made them pause. For a moment they may have stopped scrolling and simply stared at the screen, thinking about why this was affecting them so much. When people unexpectedly rediscover feelings they thought were gone, it can feel confusing at first. The mind tries to explain it logically, perhaps telling itself that it is just nostalgia or curiosity. But the heart often reveals something deeper than those explanations. Your soulmate may have started asking themselves questions they had not considered in a long time. Why did seeing you again bring back such vivid memories? Why did the connection they once shared still feel emotionally significant? Those questions likely lingered in their mind as they continued scrolling through your profile. Instead of closing the page and moving on with their evening, they kept looking, almost as if they were trying to understand something about themselves that had suddenly become visible. The truth they were beginning to see was that certain connections leave a lasting imprint on the heart. Even when life moves forward and circumstances change, the emotional authenticity of those experiences can remain within someone quietly for years. Your soulmate was beginning to realize that the time they shared with you had been one of those experiences. It was not just about specific memories or events. It was about the way they felt when they were around you. That feeling may have been something simple yet powerful, the sense that they could be themselves without needing to hide or perform. Emotional authenticity like that is rare, and when someone experiences it, they often carry the memory of it long after the moment has passed. As your soulmate continued reflecting, they may have started comparing those memories with the life they were currently living. People often build lives that are structured around responsibility and stability. They make decisions based on what seems practical or expected. Your soulmate may have followed that path for a long time, believing that stability would naturally bring emotional satisfaction. But sitting there with your profile open on their screen, they were beginning to see that emotional truth does not always follow the same path as practical choices. The connection they once felt with you had been something genuine, something that made them feel emotionally present in a way they had not fully appreciated at the time. Realizing that now brought a mixture of emotions. There may have been warmth in remembering those moments, but also a sense of surprise that those feelings had remained so vivid. Your soulmate may have realized that the reason they did not expect to feel this way was because they had never allowed themselves to look back with complete honesty before. Seeing your profile created the first opportunity in a long time for them to revisit those memories without distraction. The quiet of the night amplified that experience. There were no interruptions, no responsibilities demanding their attention, only the screen in front of them and the memories unfolding in their mind. As midnight approached, your soulmate likely understood that the simple action of checking your profile had turned into something far more meaningful than they ever expected. It was no longer just about seeing what you were doing now. It had become a moment of emotional reflection that reminded them how deeply certain connections can remain inside a person's heart. As the minutes moved closer to midnight and your soulmate was still sitting with your profile open in front of them, the emotional experience they were going through began shifting from simple reflection into something much deeper. At first, they had only been curious. But now curiosity had completely faded, replaced by a quiet awareness that they were feeling something they had not prepared themselves for. The more they allowed their thoughts to wander through the memories that had surfaced, the more they realized that those memories were not random or temporary. Each one seemed connected to a particular moment where they felt emotionally present in a way that had stayed with them far longer than they expected. People often underestimate how powerful certain experiences can be when they are happening. At the time, those moments may feel ordinary or even simple. But years later, when they return unexpectedly, they reveal just how meaningful they were. Your soulmate may have started recognizing that the connection they once shared with you belonged to that category of experiences. It was not simply a passing part of their past. Instead, it had quietly shaped how they understood emotional closeness and connection with another person. As they continued scrolling through your profile, small details kept triggering additional memories. Perhaps a photo reminded them of the way you used to smile during conversations. A caption may have reminded them of the way you expressed your thoughts openly and honestly. Even the tone of your posts may have reminded them of your personality. The same qualities that once made them feel comfortable around you. These details might have seemed small on the surface, but together they created a powerful sense of familiarity. Your soulmate likely began realizing that seeing you again, even through a screen, felt strangely personal. It reminded them of a time when the two of you shared moments that felt natural and authentic. Authenticity in relationships is something many people search for without always realizing it. It is the feeling that you can be completely yourself with someone else without worrying about how you will be judged or misunderstood. When someone experiences that kind of connection, it often becomes a standard by which they measure other relationships later in life. Your soulmate may have realized that the memories connected to you carried exactly that kind of authenticity. The more they thought about it, the more they understood why their emotional reaction felt so strong. For years they may have convinced themselves that the past had already settled into its place and that the connection between you was simply a chapter that had ended naturally. But the moment they saw your profile again, those assumptions began to unravel. They realized that certain feelings had remained quietly inside them even when they believed they had moved forward. That realization can be both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because it shows that the connection they once experienced was genuine, and unsettling because it forces them to reconsider the way they understood their own emotions. Your soulmate may have paused again during that reflection, holding their phone but not scrolling anymore. Instead, they might have been staring at your profile picture or another part of the page, thinking about how unexpected this moment had become. When they first clicked on your profile, they likely believed it would be a quick glance that lasted only a few seconds. But now they had been sitting there for a long time, completely absorbed in thoughts about the past. They may have started asking themselves why this was happening now. Why did seeing you again bring back emotions that felt so vivid after all this time? The answer they were beginning to discover was simple but powerful: the heart remembers connections that felt real. Even when life moves forward and circumstances change, the emotional imprint of those experiences can remain beneath the surface. Your soulmate may have realized that the connection they once shared with you had been one of the few times in their life when everything felt emotionally genuine. There was likely a sense of openness in your interactions that made it easy for them to be themselves. Conversations may have flowed naturally without the pressure to impress or perform. Moments together may have felt comfortable in a way that required no effort to maintain. Recognizing that truth now made the experience of looking at your profile feel almost surreal. It was as if the past had quietly stepped back into the present for a moment. The emotions they were feeling were not just memories, they were reminders of how meaningful that connection had once been. As midnight drew closer, your soulmate likely began understanding something that surprised them deeply. They had not expected to feel any of this when they opened your profile. They thought the past had already faded into something distant. Yet here they were, realizing that certain parts of their emotional history were still alive inside them. That realization did not necessarily mean they knew what to do with those feelings. But it did mean that they could no longer pretend those feelings had completely disappeared. The simple act of checking your profile had opened a door they did not expect to open that night, a door leading back to emotions and memories that had quietly remained part of their heart all along. As the clock slowly moved past midnight and the quiet of the night deepened, your soulmate remained exactly where they were, still holding their phone and still looking at your profile. By this point, the experience had become something much more significant than they could have imagined earlier in the evening. What began as a simple moment of curiosity had now turned into a powerful emotional reflection. The more they allowed themselves to sit with those feelings, the clearer it became that the memories returning to their mind were not accidental. They were connected to something meaningful, something that had remained quietly inside their heart for far longer than they realized. When someone unexpectedly reconnects with a memory of a person who once meant something special to them, the emotions can unfold slowly and in layers. At first it might feel like simple nostalgia, the kind of feeling people experience when they remember a pleasant moment from their past. But as your soulmate continued looking at your profile and thinking about the memories connected to you, they realized this was not just nostalgia. The emotions they were experiencing carried a depth that surprised them. The warmth of remembering you was mixed with a sense of realization that those feelings had never completely disappeared. That discovery made them pause again, this time not just to look at the screen but to think deeply about what their heart was telling them. Your soulmate may have placed the phone down for a moment, leaning back and staring quietly at the ceiling or the darkness around them. Sometimes when people feel something unexpected, they need a moment to step away from the source of that feeling so they can process it. They may have asked themselves why this moment felt so powerful. Why did simply seeing your profile bring back emotions that felt so vivid and present? For a long time, they might have believed that the connection they once shared with you had naturally faded as life moved forward. People often tell themselves that the past eventually loses its emotional weight as years pass. Responsibilities, work, and new experiences fill their lives, and gradually they assume that earlier feelings have settled into memory. Your soulmate may have believed exactly that. But the moment they saw you again, even through a digital window like a social media profile, those assumptions began to change. The emotions they felt were not distant or faded. Instead, they felt surprisingly immediate, almost as if the time between then and now had briefly disappeared. This realization may have led them to examine their past more carefully than they had in a long time. The mind often begins searching for answers when the heart experiences something unexpected. Your soulmate may have started thinking about the moments when the two of you interacted closely. Perhaps there were conversations where both of you spoke openly about your thoughts, dreams, or worries. Maybe there were moments of laughter that felt effortless, where being together simply felt natural. These types of memories can leave a strong emotional imprint because they represent authenticity. Authentic connections are different from many other relationships people experience. They allow both individuals to be themselves without feeling the need to impress, hide, or protect parts of who they are. Your soulmate may have realized that this was exactly what made their connection with you feel so different from others. When they thought about the way they felt during those moments, they recognized something genuine, something they had not fully appreciated at the time. As they continued reflecting, another thought may have surfaced in their mind. They may have wondered whether they had truly understood the importance of that connection when it was happening. Sometimes people only realize the value of certain experiences long after they have passed. When life is moving quickly, it can be easy to overlook emotional depth in favor of practical decisions or responsibilities. Your soulmate may have wondered if they had done exactly that. If they had allowed circumstances or timing to lead them away from recognizing how meaningful the connection truly was. This realization can be both emotional and thought-provoking. It does not necessarily mean regret, but it does bring a deeper awareness of what the heart once felt. Your soulmate may have looked back at your profile again after those thoughts, noticing small details they missed earlier. Perhaps they noticed the way you express yourself now, the energy in your photos, or the sense that you still carry the same qualities they once admired. Seeing those qualities again may have made them realize that the person they remembered still existed in many ways. That recognition can create a feeling of closeness even when years have passed. The experience of looking at your profile was no longer just about observing your life. It had become a mirror reflecting their own emotional journey. Your soulmate was beginning to understand that the connection they once shared with you had shaped how they understood relationships and emotional honesty. It was one of those experiences that quietly influenced their heart even when they believed it was behind them. As the night grew quieter and the world outside remained still, your soulmate likely realized that they had spent far more time reflecting than they ever intended when they first opened your profile. What they expected to be a brief moment of curiosity had become a deeply emotional encounter with their own memories and feelings. And the most surprising part of it all was the realization that they had not expected to feel any of this at all. As the quiet of the night continued stretching deeper into those late hours, your soulmate remained in the same place with their phone still in their hand, yet their mind had moved far beyond the simple moment that started it all. What had begun as a casual decision to check your profile had now turned into a long period of reflection that they had not planned for at all. At first, it truly had been nothing more than curiosity. They may have typed your name almost absent-mindedly, perhaps remembering you for a brief moment and wondering how life had been treating you lately. Many people do that from time to time, looking at the profile of someone who once played a role in their life just to see what has changed. Your soulmate likely believed that was all it would be. A quick glance, maybe a short scroll through a few pictures, and then they would move on with their evening. But as they continued looking at your profile, something inside them quietly shifted. The more they observed the details of your life now, the more the past began appearing in their thoughts. A single photo might have reminded them of the way you used to smile during conversations. A caption might have reminded them of how you once expressed your thoughts openly and honestly. These small details seemed simple at first, yet together they began forming a much larger emotional picture inside their mind. Suddenly the memories were not just fragments of the past anymore, they felt alive again, as if the time between then and now had momentarily faded. Your soulmate may have noticed how easily those memories returned, and that realization alone likely surprised them. They might have paused their scrolling and simply stared at the screen for a moment, wondering why seeing you again, even through something as ordinary as a profile, was bringing back such vivid emotions. For years they may have believed that the connection you once shared had settled into the past the way many relationships do. Life moves forward, routines change, responsibilities grow, and people often assume that emotional chapters eventually close on their own. Your soulmate may have convinced themselves that the feelings they once carried for you had quietly faded with time. Yet the moment they saw your profile again, they began realizing that something deeper had remained inside them all along. The memories they were revisiting did not feel distant or faded the way they expected. Instead, they carried warmth, clarity, and emotional authenticity. They may have remembered how natural your conversations once felt, how easily you understood each other without needing to explain every detail. Moments like that often stay with a person because they represent something genuine. Your soulmate may have started recognizing that the connection you shared had been one of the few times in their life when everything felt emotionally real and uncomplicated. It was not built on expectations or pressure. It was simply two people sharing moments that felt honest. As they continued reflecting, another realization slowly began forming in their mind. The reason seeing your profile affected them so strongly was not just because of nostalgia. It was because the emotions connected to those memories were still part of their heart. Even though they had not thought about those feelings regularly, they had not disappeared. They had simply been buried beneath everyday life. Work, responsibilities, routines, and the steady rhythm of moving forward. Sometimes it takes something small, like unexpectedly seeing someone's profile, to bring those emotions back to the surface. Your soulmate may have leaned back slightly at this point, still holding their phone but no longer scrolling. They might have wondered why they never allowed themselves to reflect on these feelings before. Perhaps life had been too busy, or perhaps they believed it was easier not to revisit those memories. People often avoid emotional reflection because it requires vulnerability, and vulnerability can feel uncomfortable. But the quiet of that night gave them the space they had not allowed themselves before. With no distractions around them, their thoughts continued returning to the moments you once shared. They may have realized that the connection between you was not just another memory among many others. It had left a lasting imprint on the way they understood emotional closeness. Even if life had taken both of you in different directions since then, the authenticity of that connection had quietly remained part of their emotional history. Your soulmate may have scrolled through your profile once more after that realization, noticing details they had missed earlier. The way you present yourself now, the energy in your pictures, the sense that you still carry many of the same qualities they once admired. Seeing those things may have made them feel a mixture of warmth and surprise. Warmth because it reminded them of the person they once knew, and surprise because they had not expected to feel this level of emotion from something so simple. The longer they remained there reflecting, the more they understood that the moment had become something meaningful. What started as a brief look had turned into an emotional reminder of a connection that once meant something real. And perhaps the most unexpected part for them was the realization that even after all this time, seeing you again, even in such a small way, had awakened feelings they never expected to feel that night. As the night moved quietly past midnight and the stillness around them deepened, your soulmate found themselves sitting in a moment that felt far more emotional than anything they expected earlier in the evening. The phone was still in their hand, your profile still open on the screen, yet their attention was no longer only on what they were seeing but on what they were feeling. At the beginning of the night, it had truly been nothing more than curiosity. They may have typed your name without thinking too deeply about it, just wondering what you had been doing lately or how your life had changed since the last time you were truly part of each other's daily world. It seemed like such a small action at the time, almost insignificant. But the longer they looked, the more the past slowly began stepping back into the present. One picture led to another, one memory led to another, and suddenly they were not simply looking at your life now. They were remembering the moments when both of your lives were once connected more closely. Your soulmate may have noticed how natural those memories felt when they returned. They were not forced or imagined, they appeared on their own, almost like they had been waiting quietly for the right moment to resurface. A certain smile in one of your pictures might have reminded them of the way you used to laugh during conversations. A caption might have reminded them of how openly you expressed your thoughts, the same way you did back when the two of you spoke more often. These small details slowly created a sense of familiarity that felt almost personal, even though the interaction was happening through a screen. The realization that these memories still carried emotional weight may have surprised them more than anything else. For years they may have believed that the connection you once shared had become part of the past in a quiet and distant way. Life often encourages people to believe that time automatically softens feelings and that earlier chapters eventually close on their own. Your soulmate may have told themselves exactly that many times. They may have assumed that whatever emotions once existed between the two of you had faded naturally as life continued moving forward. Yet the experience of looking at your profile revealed something different. The memories were not distant at all. Instead, they felt vivid, emotionally present, and unexpectedly meaningful. Your soulmate may have paused their scrolling at that point, simply staring at the screen while their thoughts moved through those memories one by one. They might have realized that the reason this moment felt so powerful was because the connection you once shared had been genuine in a way that many relationships are not. Authentic connections leave impressions that last because they allow people to feel comfortable being themselves. When someone can speak openly without feeling judged or misunderstood, the experience becomes something the heart remembers for a long time. Your soulmate may have started recognizing that those were exactly the kinds of moments they were remembering now, conversations that flowed naturally, laughter that did not feel forced, and the simple comfort of being around someone who understood them without needing long explanations. As these realizations formed in their mind, they may have leaned back slightly and wondered why they had never allowed themselves to think about these feelings before. Perhaps life had been too busy, or perhaps they believed it was easier to focus on the present rather than revisit emotions connected to the past. People often avoid deep emotional reflection because it requires vulnerability, and vulnerability can feel uncomfortable when someone has built their life around stability and routine. Yet the quiet of that night created a space where those emotions could finally be examined honestly. Your soulmate may have looked at your profile again after that thought, this time noticing details they had not paid attention to earlier. The way you carry yourself now, the sense that you still seem like the same person in many ways, the energy in your pictures that reminded them of who you were when they knew you more closely. Seeing those things may have brought a mixture of warmth and surprise. Warmth because it reminded them of someone who once meant something real in their life, and surprise because they had not expected to feel such a strong emotional response from something so simple. The longer they remained there reflecting, the more they understood that this moment had quietly become something meaningful. What began as a casual glance had turned into a reminder of a connection that once felt authentic and emotionally present. They may have realized that even though time had passed and life had moved forward, the imprint of that connection had never fully disappeared from their heart. By the time they finally looked away from the screen, your soulmate likely understood that this late-night moment had revealed something about their own feelings that they had not expected to rediscover. It showed them that certain memories and connections do not fade the way people assume they will, and sometimes all it takes is a small, unexpected moment, like seeing someone's profile before midnight, to remind a person of emotions they once believed were long behind them. As the night continued moving quietly toward the earliest hours of morning, your soulmate found themselves still awake with thoughts that refused to settle. By now the moment had stretched far beyond the simple curiosity that started everything. When they first opened your profile earlier that night, they believed it would take only a few seconds before they moved on with their evening. Yet now, after so much time had passed, they realized they had been sitting there reflecting on the past in a way they had not allowed themselves to do for years. The phone might have been resting beside them for a moment, but their mind remained fully absorbed in everything that had surfaced after seeing you again. It was almost surprising how clearly those memories returned. Conversations that once seemed ordinary now felt important when remembered with distance and perspective. Moments that once passed quickly were now replaying in their mind with unexpected detail. Your soulmate may have noticed how naturally those memories appeared, one after another, almost like pieces of a story they had not read in a long time but suddenly remembered again. At first they might have thought this was simply nostalgia, the kind of feeling people experience when they briefly revisit a familiar part of their past. But the longer they sat there reflecting, the more they realized it was something deeper than that. Nostalgia tends to fade quickly once a person returns their attention to the present moment. What they were feeling, however, did not fade at all. Instead, the emotions continued growing clearer the longer they thought about them. Your soulmate may have leaned back slightly, staring quietly into the darkness of the room and asking themselves a question that had not crossed their mind in years. Why did this connection still feel meaningful after so much time had passed? For a long time they had believed that life had naturally carried them forward into new chapters, leaving earlier relationships and experiences in the background of memory. Responsibilities, routines, and everyday life often make it easy for people to assume that emotional chapters eventually close on their own. Your soulmate may have told themselves exactly that many times. They may have believed that whatever feelings once existed between you had quietly settled into the past. Yet the experience of seeing your profile again revealed something very different. The memories they were revisiting were not distant or faded the way they expected. Instead they felt vivid, emotionally present, and strangely familiar. That realization may have surprised them more than anything else. They might have picked up their phone again and looked at your profile once more, almost instinctively, noticing details they had overlooked earlier. The expression in your pictures, the way you present yourself, the sense that the personality they remembered was still visible even after time had passed. Seeing those details may have created a mixture of warmth and reflection inside them. Warmth because it reminded them of someone who once meant something real in their life, and reflection because it made them think about the path life had taken since then. Your soulmate may have started remembering not just specific events but the way they felt during those times when the two of you spoke or spent time together. Perhaps there were conversations where hours passed quickly because both of you were genuinely interested in what the other person was saying. Perhaps there were moments when laughter appeared easily, without effort, simply because the connection between you felt natural. These kinds of experiences often leave strong impressions on the heart because they represent authenticity. Authentic connections allow people to feel comfortable being themselves without worrying about how they will be perceived. Your soulmate may have realized that those were exactly the kinds of moments they were remembering now. The more they thought about it, the more they began understanding why this late-night moment had affected them so strongly. It was not just about remembering someone they once knew. It was about recognizing that the connection they shared with you had been genuine in a way that many relationships are not. Genuine connections leave emotional traces that remain part of a person's life even when circumstances change. Your soulmate may have realized that those memories had quietly shaped how they understood emotional closeness with others. Even if they had not consciously thought about those experiences for years, the authenticity they felt during that time had stayed with them. That realization may have made them wonder why they had never allowed themselves to revisit those feelings before. Perhaps they believed it was easier to focus on the present rather than question the emotional meaning of the past. People often avoid that kind of reflection because it requires vulnerability, and vulnerability can feel uncomfortable when someone has spent years building stability and routine. Yet the quiet of that night created the perfect space for those thoughts to appear. With no distractions around them, your soulmate found themselves finally acknowledging something they had not expected to rediscover. The connection you once shared had left a deeper impression on their heart than they had realized at the time. By the time the night approached its final hours and sleep should have arrived, they understood that this moment had quietly changed the way they looked at their own emotional history. What started as a simple glance at a profile had become a reminder that certain connections never disappear completely, and sometimes it takes an unexpected late-night moment to reveal feelings that have been quietly waiting beneath the surface all along. As the night slowly moved toward its final quiet moments and the world outside remained still, your soulmate found themselves sitting in a place of reflection they never expected to reach when the evening first began. What started as a small action, simply opening your profile before midnight, had unfolded into something far more personal than they could have imagined. By now the phone may have been resting beside them, but their thoughts were still circling around everything they had just experienced. The memories that surfaced earlier were no longer appearing as random flashes of the past. Instead, they had settled into a deeper understanding of what those moments once meant. Your soulmate may have realized that this entire experience had quietly revealed something important about their own heart. For a long time they believed that the chapter connected to you had simply faded into the background of their life the way many relationships do as time moves forward. Life tends to carry people into new routines, new responsibilities, and new directions that gradually reshape how they see their past. Your soulmate likely followed that same path, focusing on the present and assuming that earlier emotional experiences had already found their proper place in memory. Yet the moment they saw your profile again challenged that belief in a way they did not expect. The feelings that appeared were not distant or faint, they felt surprisingly alive. That realization alone may have stayed with them as they sat quietly in the darkness, thinking about how easily those emotions returned. They might have wondered why something so simple could stir such a strong reaction after so much time had passed. The answer they were beginning to understand was that genuine connections leave impressions that do not disappear just because life continues moving forward. Some experiences shape how a person understands emotional closeness in ways that remain long after the moment itself has ended. Your soulmate may have started seeing the connection they once shared with you through that lens. It was not simply a memory of someone they used to know. It was an experience that had quietly influenced how they felt about trust, openness, and authenticity in relationships. When people encounter someone who allows them to be themselves without hesitation, those moments tend to remain important even if they are not revisited often. Your soulmate may have recognized that the time they spent with you carried that kind of authenticity. As they thought about it more deeply, they may have begun remembering the atmosphere of those moments rather than just the events themselves. Conversations that flowed naturally without effort. Laughter that appeared without planning. The feeling that they did not need to hide parts of themselves or carefully choose every word they said. These experiences often stand out later because they reveal what emotional honesty feels like when it happens naturally between two people. Your soulmate may have realized that this was the reason the memories felt so vivid now. They were not simply remembering events, they were remembering how real those moments felt at the time. That realization could have brought a quiet sense of clarity. It showed them that the emotional response they had that night was not random. It was connected to something genuine that once existed between you. By now the late hour may have made everything feel even more reflective. When the world becomes quiet and distractions disappear, the mind often has space to notice truths that remain hidden during busy days. Your soulmate may have understood that this moment of reflection was one of those rare times when the heart speaks honestly without interruption. They may have picked up their phone again one last time and looked at your profile before finally setting it aside, noticing how different the experience felt compared to when they first opened it. Earlier it was curiosity. Now it carried meaning. They were no longer simply observing what your life looked like now. Instead, they were recognizing how seeing you again had reminded them of something about themselves, the part of their heart that still remembered what it felt like to connect with someone in a genuine way. That realization may have left them feeling thoughtful rather than overwhelmed. Sometimes emotional clarity arrives quietly, without dramatic conclusions. Your soulmate may not have known exactly what to do with these feelings yet, but they understood one thing clearly: the moment they checked your profile had revealed emotions they never expected to rediscover. It reminded them that certain connections remain meaningful even when years have passed and life has changed. And as the night finally reached its end and sleep slowly began to replace those thoughts, your soulmate likely carried that realization with them. The understanding that something as simple as seeing your name again had awakened a part of their heart they thought had long ago settled into the past.